Welcome to Imposter Podcast, where we affirm the lived experiences of professionals of color who navigate imposter syndrome and racial toxicity at work. The tools that you learn here will help you confidently address racial toxicity at work, put that imposter syndrome to the side, stand in your power, and resist racial gaslighting. I'm your host, Whitney Knox-Lee, a Black mother to Black boy children, a civil rights attorney, and an anti-racism educator and trainer. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We're glad you're here. Episodes are published every week. Make sure you go back and listen to our past episodes. All right, here we go. Hey, and welcome back to Imposter Podcast. I'm your host, Whitney Knox-Lee. I am excited for you to listen to this episode. As you know, if you're a regular listener, we are currently on our season break, and we will be returning with season 2 in February of 2024. So right now, what I wanted to do is uplift one of my podcasting friends who has a show that I really enjoy listening to. We have attended a podcasting conference together. She has served as inspiration for me over this first year of podcasting, and her name is Tanya. She's the host of Tea with Tanya Podcast, and she talks about health and well-being and how to find balance and promoting positivity in our lives. Tanya is just finishing up graduate school. She is getting her master's in public health. She has a nonprofit and is all into all things women's health. She's also, this is a fun fact, I think, about Tanya. She is from Antigua. I don't know that I know anybody from Antigua. So in my little limited American worldview, that's a pretty cool fun fact for me. So in this episode, I joined her on her podcast, and we talked about imposter syndrome, overcoming imposter syndrome, and what it looks like for both of us in our lives. So I thought this would be a good episode to share because, one, it's on topic. Two, it gives me an opportunity to share and uplift work that I really admire and I want you all to know. So that's it. We're going to jump into this show. So I hope you enjoy. Before I get started, though, you can follow Tanya on Instagram at Tea with Tanya Podcast. Tanya spelled Tanya. And she also has a great newsletter that has lots of tips. And then you can subscribe to her show on the audio podcast platforms. All right, here we go.
Welcome to Tea with Tanya. I'm your host, Tanya Ambrose, an average millennial navigating life as a maternal health professional, nonprofit founder, and grad student. Join me in the tea tasting room where we spill the tea on finding balance and promoting positive living while doing it all. Hey, my friend. Welcome back to another episode of Tea with Tanya. Thank you for joining me here in the tea tasting room. It is always a pleasure to be here with you every Tuesday, chatting with you, getting to know you, spilling the tea, sharing wisdom, doing all the good stuff. It is a pleasure to be here with you. But yes, the tea of this week is ginger peach turmeric herbal tea, which I'm having, which is really, really good. I'm trying to eliminate refined sugars out of my diet for this month, but it's so hard. Let me tell you, sis, it is so hard. So I'm, incorporating some honey into my tea. Sometimes I'm going honey or sugarless, and that has been a feat, but I'm getting there. So that's the tea of the week. It is ginger, peach, turmeric, herbal tea. Remember, if you're trying these teas, be sure to send me an email or tag me on Instagram. Let me see you in these tea mugs. Let me see what you got going on. Let me see you sipping on these teas that I am recommending so that we can be drinking the same tea here in the tea tasting room. I am very excited for today's guest. I'm excited for the conversation that we're about to have. I am just overly excited. She's also another podcast host. I had the privilege of seeing her in person. I'm meeting her in person for the very first time, which we'll talk about that when she gets on the podcast. But I'm looking forward to today's episode. I am back with another episode, and I am happy to have this special person. And I always say everyone is special, but she is special. She has become someone special to me. So if she didn't know that then, now she's going to know here in the tea tasting room that she is a special part of my life now. And I had the pleasure of connecting with her via Instagram. One thing about me, I do like networking over social media. It's not always bad. You can use it for good. And thankfully, I was able to meet our guest in person for the first time a week or so ago at the Black Pod Festival in Atlanta. And let me tell you, the personality that you see, that you hear on her podcast, let me tell you, what you see is legitimately what you get with her. I am big on energy, and her energy has been absolutely amazing. So welcome to the Tea Tasting Room, Whitney. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Things could be, it's been a week. Like you were just sharing, it's been a week for you. It's been a week and my energy is a little low today, but we're here and I'm excited to be here. This has been a long time coming, y'all.
It has been, and we are here. But like my mantra, nothing happens before it's time. So now we are here. And how we do it here, Whitney, in the tea tasting room, you got to tell us, because we are nosy people here in the tea tasting room. So you got to tell us a little about yourself. Don't hold anything back. Give it to us all about what you do, who you are, and everything in between.
Yes. Okay, so my name is Whitney Lee. I am an attorney. I am a DEI and anti-racism educator and trainer, and I am a podcast host. My podcast is called Imposter Podcast, and we validate and affirm professionals of color who navigate imposter syndrome and racial toxicity in their careers. I am also a mom to 2 little boys. One of them he's turning 6 this month. So we're having his birthday party tomorrow at Chuck E. Cheese, which is going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot.
Why you say a lot? It's going to be, that pizza at Chuck E. Cheese, it's just,
The pizza is good, but it's so many children running around and so many sounds and noises. Like it's not sensory friendly. Let's just put it that way.
No, yeah, that part, I get it. Talk about being overstimulated. But, again, you're a rock star of a mom. So you're going to handle it like a champ and do what you got to do. So
thank you.
No doubt about that. But definitely, I do want to thank you for joining me. And it's funny that we're talking about imposter syndrome today. Let me tell you, I've been sitting and asking you to be a guest on the podcast for weeks. I'm being honest, for weeks because of imposter syndrome. Like, I'm like, you know what? I'm not good enough for her. Like, who's this girl talking about tea with? I'm just telling you my thoughts. Don't judge me, honey. Like, don't be squinting up your face at me, okay? I was like, no, I'm this little podcast girl. Guys, definitely not a little podcast girl. We're killing it out here. But I'm like, who am I for you to be coming on my podcast talking to me? It's all these thoughts that we have, not realizing that we are doing something in this world. We are somebody. We are important, no matter how big or small a role we may play in whatever area of our life. But I sat on asking you for a while. Even when I asked you, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I sent that message. It was just, listen.
I cannot believe this.
Really? I'm an overthinker. Let me tell you, I'm an overthinker naturally. Don't ask me why. I overthink myself out and into things. And I was like, okay, you know what? She'll be a good guest. I want to be her podcast too. And she's killing it. When I see many of us doing the same things, similar things in the podcast space, because, there's not many Black podcasters out here. And I was like, okay, let me see. I had in my mind that you were going to say yes, because just from talking to you, the energy, because I'm an energy person. But again, whenever it comes to me asking guests to be on my podcast, something just disconnects in my mind, thinking that I'm not essentially worthy or I don't have enough episodes, whatever the case may be. So I'm just happy. She's laughing at me, guys.
I am, because I learned last weekend when we were at that festival that you've released an episode every week for almost a year. Like, what? You're like master podcaster at this point. So it's just surprising to me, because I'm like, of course I'm going to be on your podcast. I don't know.
It's just what I do. And then when it happens, leading up to us recording at the time that we said, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm going to tell us, let's just cancel it. Let's wait till next week. Let me get my confidence up. Let me tell you, again, overthinking, you have no idea. I'm like, my energy is not right today. It's kind of low. And I'm like, no, I'm going to tell you, what, let's do it next week, because I'm overthinking myself out of us doing this. But I'm happy that I'm here, because now, the energy feels right. But that's just what happened. So for those of us, because I think in my mind, that was me going through a little bit of an imposter syndrome for some reason, as I my podcast. So for those who are listening who may not know, we've always heard or seen about people talk about imposter syndrome. What exactly is it and how, yes, that's what it is first, and then we'll get into the other specifics.
Yeah. So let me start by saying I am not an expert on imposter syndrome. The reason why I started my podcast is because I was experiencing it. And I was like, also, I think my race has something to do with this. And I think my gender has something to do with this. And like, so what is this and why? That was the whole reason for my podcast. And so I've kind of got into it a little bit now to understand more about what my experiences are, but also to understand that I'm not the only one. And I think that that's a big part of addressing imposter syndrome is this realization that we're not alone in our feeling. So what is imposter syndrome? It's a feeling as though that I am intellectually fake and have fooled everyone around me into thinking otherwise. So it can be regarding a specific thing, and usually it is. So maybe with podcasting, or maybe in your workplace, or maybe even as a mom. Like that's something that I experienced when I had kids was like, so they're just going to let me take this baby home from the hospital? Like nobody wants to check and make sure that like I'm not, like I'm okay, like I can raise this child. And so people that experience imposter syndrome experience it internally. So it's thoughts that they have about themselves that may or may not be real and may or may not be perpetuated by outside factors. We attribute our success to luck instead of, oh, I worked hard for this and I'm smart and I achieved this degree. We say somebody just didn't know me. Like they just didn't know, or they felt bad. So they went ahead and gave me this degree, or they went ahead and gave me that A, even though I know that I deserved a D. We don't give ourselves the props that we're due. And then when we fail at something, that is the point where we give ourselves our props. So like if we fail at something, we say, yeah, it's because I suck, duh. Instead of I just had a bad day, or I just didn't understand, let me allow myself some grace. So it's like on the one hand, we're successful because we're lucky. On the other hand, we fail because that's our true capacity, our true competency. One of the other key characteristics is that it's objectively, like the objective evidence to the contrary does not matter to us. So even though for myself, for example, I got my law degree. I went to law school. I got into law school. I completed it, and then got a degree. And then I passed the bar. And then I got a job as an attorney. And even though I did all of those things, I can still feel as though I don't belong. Like I'm not a lawyer. I tricked somebody into thinking that I was a lawyer and should not be here. And that's just not the case because I did all the things. I did everything that's required of me. So, I followed what society says I need to do in order to have this degree, in order to practice in these courtrooms, in order to charge whatever it is that I'm charging. Yet I feel like an imposter. I feel like I'm fake. So that's what it is. And I'll say too that around 25 to 30% of high achievers suffer from imposter syndrome. And we think that those numbers are higher for people of color. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then most adults, around 80%, experience imposter syndrome at least once in their lifetime about something. So as I'm describing this, folks who are listening, may be able to say, oh, yep, I remember when that thing happened and I felt this way, or I'm currently feeling this way, or I didn't have the language for that, but now I do. And I'm definitely, feeling this imposter syndrome. And so that was also part of why I wanted to start having these conversations around imposter syndrome and race is because I think some of like talking about it and acknowledging it as something that is like a normal thing, normalizing it, I think takes some of the power from it.
No, I agree. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I recently started grad school, as you know, and I'm so used to being in class with people who are my age. I mean, I ain't that old, but still in my peers. And now I am one of the older individuals in the class. I'm in class with like 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds. So I am now one of the older persons in the class. And I remember my first semester back in January, I was the only Black person in this class. The only Black person. So think about one, having to be the only Black person in the class. Two, as much as I was one of those individuals who had more experience in the class compared, from an academic standpoint, from a professional standpoint as well. And the topics that we would talk about on a weekly basis were things that, of course, I was learning, don't get me wrong, but they were things that I had I'm going to say a little bit more preview, a little bit more knowledge about in that class. But I just remember it would be every Tuesday. I kid you not, every Tuesday I go to that class from at 8 o'clock or 8:30, whatever class it was. And I feel like, it was imposter syndrome. I'll be in the class quiet. The teacher would ask a question, we'll have certain discussions, and I'm just there quiet because I'm like, I don't want to be that person. I know the answer, or I thought I knew the answer. Let's put it that way. And I would never answer that question until she would call on me. Oh, Tanya, let's hear your voice. X, Y, Z. And then when I would give my opinion or answer the question, it should be like, oh, you're a brilliant question. Even the same thing when it came to writing a paper. Oh, you write so well. I'm like, me, Tanya, I write so well. Again, knowing in my mind that I can write, because writing is a thing it's how I express myself versus talking verbally. Ironically, I have a podcast, but still. But hearing these things, even though I'm hearing these things, like I had a conference with my professor a few weeks ago, because she's like, you know what, you did a paper and it wasn't up to your usual standard. And I will say it wasn't, because I just rushed through it because I just was not feeling well. I'm like, you know what, let me just do it because I don't want to miss an assignment. And she's there telling me, you write so well, you should consider doing a PhD. I'm like, I said, let me get through halfway to this master's first, and then we can think about that. But the point is, I just did not believe in myself. And whenever I go to class, I just get shy. I'm like, okay, you make me, I like to talk. I'll talk all day. We would, you and I, we can talk all day.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember every week it just felt like I was not myself, or I wasn't worthy of being in this class, being at this graduate level, or even realizing that I know the answers or to these questions. And I think, again, and then being the only Black person in the classroom doesn't really help either, because, I got to think about, okay, I'm already Black. So if they're already whatever they're thinking about me, that's one. You don't want to always make everything about race when it comes to an answer, but then sometimes it's just it is what it is. So I'm thinking all these things, I'm battling that, and it makes me sad sometimes. So I'm just trying to, I guess for you, how would you say imposter syndrome contributes to self-sabotage? Because I think sometimes I do that to myself. I'm thinking, you know what, you're not good enough, you don't need to do this, or it stops me from going forward with something with my nonprofit. Like I wanted to have an event in Antigua. The first time we had it was back in 2022. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, we're not worthy. We're just a small little old nonprofit. Nobody's going to believe us. Nobody's going to come. Knowing good and well the impact. Mind you, I know the numbers are there. I can see the impact of what we are doing within my organization. But for some reason, I'm still thinking that I'm being a phony, I'm being a fake. Might take away all the credentials I may have, all the skills, all the experience. They're there.
You're right.
I work hard for them. But for some reason, every time I'm like, you know what? We're phony, we're fake, we're not worthy. So how does imposter syndrome contribute to self-sabotage? I know I said a mouthful, but...
No, well, I think that these are good questions, because what I'll say, people with imposter syndrome we do a variety of things to make ourselves feel better or to make ourselves feel small, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at times. So we might work harder or overwork because we think that we're stupid. Mm-hmm. So we're doing these things to hide our stupidity. We might hide our real selves, our ideas, and our values in order to people please other people. We may, on the flip side, try and charm people to gain outside approval. Mm-hmm. So I might take an interest in something that I know a professor or a boss or a supervisor has, so that I can kind of relate to them and charm them in a way so that once I'm being my real self and they find out that I suck at this thing, mm-hmm. they won't fire me, or they won't give me the D, or they won't, do whatever perceived negative thing that I'm afraid of. We have a fear of failure. And so we do a lot of extra things to prevent ourselves from failing. But at the same time, we can have a guilt around our success. Because oftentimes, anybody can experience imposter syndrome, but high achievers experience it, especially. That's when imposter phenomenon was coined. It came to these two researchers, these white women who were researching here in Atlanta. And the research was around instances of imposter phenomenon in white, middle-aged, high-achieving people, women specifically. Right. And so, we can be or feel guilty or fearful about achieving success, and the way that success may isolate us from our friends and from our family or from our community. So, for example, particularly in communities of color, making a lot of money, if we come from a place that does not, if we have poverty in our background, or if our communities are communities that are living in poverty, and we become successful and make all this money, then all of a sudden, are we still considered part of the community, or is our community going to feel as though we've turned our back on them, or we've like whitewashed ourselves, or like we are trying to distance ourselves from those people?
Mm-hmm.
And then a fear of rejection and a guilt too, that we were successful when maybe others in our community were not.
That's a big one.
Yeah. And so as far as self-sabotage, I think all of these things can really play into how we can self-sabotage ourselves, because we are trying to balance everything.
Yeah.
We are trying to be great. We are trying to believe in ourselves. We are trying to support our communities and still be a part of our communities. We are trying to gain approval, because as we know, like a lot of times that's how we move forward, is by who we know.
Yeah.
And how that person can connect us to whatever it is that we're trying to get. Like, it's not, oftentimes we're not being successful just because we're smart. We're being successful because we're smart and we know somebody. So we might hide our real selves, and we might experience some resentment because of that, because we don't feel as though we can be authentic or true or show up fully in whatever environment that we're going to. And I think when it comes to like this fear of failure, sometimes we can work so hard that we're burning ourselves out. And so maybe then we can't actually be as effective, or as, I don't know if successful is the right word, but we are not meeting the standard that we've set for ourselves in all of these areas of our lives, because we have so much going on. Because maybe we derive some of our identity and our sense of self and worth through how much we can do today.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's really important, as we talk about like imposter syndrome and self-sabotage, to also talk about grace, because allowing ourselves grace when we do make mistakes, because we are human and humans make mistakes, or when we are burnt out, or when we're just tired and we need to rest, allowing that rest instead of trying to push through all the time. Because I think in pushing through when we aren't at our best is when maybe we're not performing to our best. And then like that is the self-sabotage. That is the, well, see, I wasn't successful here because I suck. No, you weren't successful maybe because of any number of things, and some of which may have nothing to do with you. Maybe you weren't successful in this situation because the person that is hiring doesn't like you.
The color of your skin.
The color of your skin, your gender, your abilities, or, if you're somebody that lives with disabilities. Like there's so many other factors that come into play. And I think when we allow imposter syndrome to have a role in this self-sabotage, like, it's because we're putting way too much energy on us and less energy on the outside influences.
Yeah, and it comes down to giving yourself grace, like you said, because when I returned from back in Antigua, I didn't realize that I was going to experience burnout, because I'm just like, I'm this girl, I'm going to push through. That's just what I do, push through anything. And I had to quickly realize that, girl, you need to just take a step back. The organization is going to be there. You can take a break, because leading up to said event in May, like planning an event, first of all, is no easy feat. Okay. And doing it in a different country, it takes a lot. And I think, again, as a high achiever, wanting things to be successful, but at the same time thinking that, you're not doing enough, and that you wanting to please other people as well. Because for me, I do have a people-pleasing tendency that I'm trying to just eliminate altogether, because it really sometimes can affect who I am as a person. So I remember having to give myself grace, because I wanted to still push through. And then before you know it, I took 2.5 months off, and then now I'm ready to be back in the swing of things, because I have the energy. And even in that time off, I'm like, wow, this is a really long time. I need to essentially rest, because it is productive, give myself that grace, extend that grace. Because one thing about me now, I'm going to extend grace. Like if I don't feel like doing something because my mind is not right, I'm going to take a breath, take a break, and then I can always come back to the task at hand, because I'm now realizing that the era of me saying push through, push through, push through, I've migrated essentially from that season, or from that time in my life, where I am going to extend grace. We are going to do the best that we can given the circumstances, but it's not always wise to push through in everything, because then you end up breaking yourself, and then you end up making things worse as it is.
Yeah. And I think just going to what you were saying, like, I think this is seasonal. I think that there are times in our lives like law school or graduate school, where it is like you have external deadlines, you have people on the outside of you who are judging you based on what they think that you know so that you can get this degree. And sometimes, there's stuff that's stacked up in school and in our personal lives and in our work lives. And sometimes we do need to just push through. But there are other times in our lives where we are creating that pressure just for the sake of creating that pressure.
Let's say that part again in case we
we create this pressure just for the sake of doing it. And those are the times where I think we need to take a step back and be like, all right, well, I'm not a super person. Like, I'm just me. I'm not God. I'm just me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's, work to be done for sure, at least for me personally, around how I live my expectations, my values, and my standards. And as I grow older and as my situation changes, like, I can't push myself like I did when I was in law school, before I was a parent, before I was a spouse to somebody. Now, with this life that I have limitations that, I need to honor. Those limitations are to protect, my time and my space with my family. Those limitations are to protect my mental health. They're to protect my physical health. And when I say limitations, what I mean is boundaries.
Yeah.
I didn't always need to have these boundaries. And even now, there are some weeks like this week, I have boundaries, but I couldn't utilize them this week because this week I had stuff that I needed to do. As a result, I'm exhausted and quite frankly feel like hungover from all of the work and the lack of sleep and the stress and the anxiety and all of that. And so sometimes we do need to do what we need to do. But I say all this to say that in the bigger picture, sometimes our seasons change because things are happening in our lives or because maybe our goals have changed. And when that happens, I think we need to honor that.
It's funny you said that, for real, because I'm one that I've been working towards practicing establishing boundaries, and I'll create them. And then I find myself sometimes pushing them back to accommodate something, pushing them back to accommodate someone. And then it's detrimental to my mental health, and then which in turn affects the physical health. And I'm realizing that, and I understand that when we create these boundaries, like you would have mentioned, sometimes you have to push through. You can't always utilize your boundaries because you know that, not because maybe some other external factor that's telling you, what, I don't respect your boundaries. So it's very hard for me sometimes to practice boundaries. And I'm like, I don't have kids, so, I do have all the time to do X, Y, Z. But like I was telling you earlier, I said, this was a very, very rough week, and I had to just not go to school. I could not go to school, go to class, and I'm a high achiever. I'm not a person that misses work. I'm not a person that misses class. I'm not a person that's late for work, for class. Like I'm an on time person. I'm always present. Being absent gives me a migraine at this point because I'm just that person. But the old me would have gone to school in the frame of mind that I've been in, couldn't even pay attention, but I was just going to go for the sake of being present. The new me now, the older, much more mature me, I'm like, you know what? I can't do it. I have to extend my grace and understand that this is my situation right now. It's not wise for me to be in attendance at school when I'll be physically present, but from a mental or even learning standpoint, I'm just, what am I going to retain? Nothing, and I just send that email to my professor, call one of them, and they're like, we understand. And that felt good. So sometimes even in the overthinking of it all, thinking that something is going to be hard and you do it, it's so much more easy. Like talking to you, like I told you, the lead up to even asking you.
Right.
Lead up to even recording this episode right now. I was like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. I'm sweating. I'm like, girl, why are you sweating? There's AC in the house.
Well, yeah. And I think, something that you mentioned around going to school and whether or not you were going to take this time, I just think that it's so important that we know, no matter the situation that we're in today, whether that's a parent, whether that's a caregiver, whether that's a single person that does not have to caretake other people, we still have stuff going on in our lives that would require us to take certain measures in order to protect ourselves or care for ourselves. And so that may be if something is happening in your family that you need some time, right. Or if something is happening with a friend and you're trying to be a support that you need some time. And I think it's cultural too. Because I hear you talking about this and I'm thinking to myself, well, if a white man went through that, they would have no problem taking off. You know, like they would have no problem sending a quick email talking about I can't show up because I got a headache. So like, I think we as people of color, and I know, so I am not from the islands. I know that Tanya is. So our cultures are going to be different, even though we both basically in the United States, we just Black people. But our cultural experiences are different and our upbringing is different. And so what you're raised with in terms of expectations and values and standards may be different than mine and are going to be different from the next person. We in adulthood, like this is our time to decide whether those values still serve us. And they can, like, yeah, they can still serve us, but it's our job, I think, as people who have agency over ourselves to decide whether, you know, I need a break today or I need to adjust this value system overall, or, you know, if something else needs to change.
No, I agree. So how, in a sense, how can we identify, because I'm hearing you say all this and I'm sharing my story too, but how can we identify imposter syndrome before it becomes too critical or a critical issue? Because I'm thinking many of us probably are walking around, you know, thinking we have imposter syndrome or we're in spaces, especially as a Black woman. And sometimes, like I say, I hate having to be, oh, Black woman, this, Black, but it's just the reality of it all. It's, you know, it's what it is. It's our life. So as a Black woman or as a Black person walking around in this world, we already have to work twice as hard. We have to show up in ways that sometimes, even when we don't want to show up, we're having to show up that way because if we don't, we're being criticized by it. So how can we identify imposter syndrome before it becomes more or less a critical issue for us?
Yeah, for me, and I think, you know, now that I spend so much of my life talking about imposter syndrome, it's a bit easier for me to acknowledge like when I'm there. But, you know, for so long, that was just something that I lived with without calling it what it was. I just thought that I was not good enough. And so I'll start out by saying, you are good enough. Like listener, you, audience, whoever, are good enough. And if you're finding yourself constantly in a situation where you're not feeling good enough, I would question whether that environment is right for you. And if it is right for you, then I think that's really the time where we focus on ourselves and focus on lifting ourselves up so that we can fill the shoes that we were made to fill. And so I'll say, I'll bring in Dr. Valerie Young for this because Dr. Young came up with, or she categorized the types of imposter syndrome into 5 categories. And we've talked to some extent about each of these already. Right. But the perfectionist, the expert, the soloist, the superhuman, and the natural genius. And I think that as far as, and I'll go through each one of those in a second, but as far as what we can do to stop it before it becomes critical, I think awareness and just the knowing that this is something that we're experiencing so that we can address it when we need to address it. And for me, like you said earlier, that you extend grace all the time. Like I am somebody that will extend grace to other people much more easily than I will extend grace to myself. So sometimes what this means for me is treating myself as if I'm somebody else. Like do what I would do for somebody else. Give the pump up talk, give the pep talk, the speech, the pat on the back that I would be giving to my best friend, give that to myself. So the perfectionist, that is a person that focuses on how the work is being done and how it turns out. And they believe that anything less than perfect means that they are incompetent. These are the folks, and you one of them, Tanya, because I listened to one of your shows where you were talking about school and grades, and I'm just like, what? Because I am not. Like, I am a perfectionist, but not as far as school is concerned. But anyways, these are people that, like, if they get a 99 on a test, they all in their feelings, they upset, they stupid all of a sudden because they got 99 instead of 100.
Drag me in my own podcast, okay?
Right. So like I'm somebody, when I get an 80, I'm like, yeah, right in the middle of the pack. But anyways, if you are somebody that's a perfectionist, if you identify as this, one reframe that Dr. Young offers is the idea that perfectionism is, or that perfection itself is relative and that there are many ways to do things. And I think that that's one way that culture and race come into this. So I'll speak more directly to this in a second, but I do think that people of color have imposter experiences uniquely different than white people. And it's because we are living in a society where whiteness culture is the default. And that culture may not be our culture. So in other words, we are operating in a space that may not always be in line or in tune with what our own values or our own culture. And so as far as perfectionism is concerned and what perfection is, realizing that what is perfection to me may not be perfect for you. So if I think that perfect is coloring in the lines, some artist somewhere, what's his face? The guy that did the splatter all over the place? Pollock.
I have no idea.
Look, I don't know. The guy that did the splatter all over the place, and everybody loves his work, but it's just splatter. Like, it looks like splatter to me.
Yeah.
Like, that type of artist may be like, nah, that's not perfect. Like, that's strict, or that's something else, but not perfect. And so just understanding that perfection is relative. The next one, the expert, is somebody that has personal standards that you must know everything on that topic. And if you don't, then you're incompetent. And that incompetence, like, so even just not knowing some small little example makes you feel shame.
Ooh.
So for people like this is also not me. I'm on here, though. I'm in this list. I'm the superhuman, so I'll get to that. But for people that are feeling as though they need to know every little thing, and when they don't know something, all of a sudden they feel less than, the reframe that we offer is that it's unrealistic to know everything. Like, this is a huge world with unlimited information.
Yep.
And even, I mean, I know you experience this with podcasting, Tanya, because I know I do. Like, I'm trying to be an expert at podcasting because the product that I want to give people is one that I want to be perfect. So I am trying to learn all of the things. But when I tell you that my brain has exploded time and time and time again, because there's endless information.
Yeah.
Endless information. And they say in podcasting, and probably in other spaces too, paralysis analysis. This idea that we have so many options, there's so much information, and we're trying to take it all in, and we're focused more on taking it all in than actually doing the thing.
Yes.
When what we need to do is just do the thing. Like, I'm somebody that learns through experience, so I especially need to just do the thing and then figure out what works and doesn't work. The soloist is the person that thinks that everything must be done by themselves, that the achievements that they do themselves are the only ones that matter. And any achievement that they've had, but that required the help of somebody else, just doesn't matter. And this is really mirrors the value that we hold in our society around pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, where, the belief is, or the myth really, that people come to the United States or who grew up in the United States believe is that as long as we try our hardest, we can do anything that we want to do, and we're doing it by ourselves. And if you're not able to do that, that's why you're homeless. That's why you don't have a job, because you were lazy and didn't do the thing, or because you were leaning too much on other people.
Right.
And so the reframe for that is that we can be competent and we can ask for help.
Set up what?
We can be competent and we can ask for help.
Okay.
Like, it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. It doesn't have to be that I need help and so I'm not competent. Instead, like, why can't it be I need help and I'm smart? And because I'm smart, I'm asking for help. Like, I know that this is the area that I suck at. Editing my episodes. I suck at editing episodes. I need help.
Right.
Like, that's okay. That is A-okay. That doesn't mean anything about me other than that's not something I'm great at.
Quality of the content, it doesn't take away from that. It's just that you need help in this particular area. And that's okay.
Right. Exactly. So we can tell ourselves that I can be competent and I can ask for help. The superhuman, which is what I really, really feel, is that our competence is measured by how much I can juggle at the same time and like be good at. And this really comes from, I think, as a kid, our parents put us in literally everything to keep us busy, but also because they worked full time.
Yeah.
And I, particularly with sports, I excelled in sports. And my expectation was just that I would be relatively good at everything. And as I grew up, I continued to add stuff to my plate. And in hindsight, it was really a way for me to run from the discomfort. Like I was somebody that did not like to be just sitting alone doing nothing. I did not like to be alone in my feelings. I did not like to feel discomfort. And so instead, I threw myself into all of these things as a way to cope with like just life. Not even life being hard, just life.
It's life.
And so now I still try and do that. And it's really difficult for me to rest. It's really difficult for me to take a break, to sit on the couch and read a book or watch TV. Like I do not do that. I sit on the couch with my computer and work or research or whatever.
We got to fix that a little bit. Just a tad bit, because I can relate to some extent where if I'm sad, I'm going to throw myself into work. If I'm happy, whatever the emotion is, pour myself into some sort of work is going to bring me some sort of joy, which is, I'm not sure that's the right coping mechanism there, but.
No, because we haven't dealt with the thing. Like we're like, okay, when I'm done with work, it's still there.
I don't know. I don't know why that is. That's the crazy part for me, because it doesn't matter if I'm sad. When I need to process that sadness or whatever would have caused me to be sad, I'm doing work. Then at the end of when I'm doing, I feel pleased because I was able to accomplish this task. But then the thing is still there, and I have to address it. And then I'm going to go find something else to do. And then before you know it, at this point is when I'm in therapy.
Right. Well, and we may get external accolades that makes us feel better. So like if you are being super productive because you're working all the time, because you're uncomfortable sitting, because I'm uncomfortable sitting in my feelings or whatever, then my boss is going to notice that I'm getting more done than other people. And I'm going to be valued more potentially than my colleagues who are taking the time to rest. And so not only do I feel a greater sense of worth and value through my overwork or being this superhuman, but so do other people outside of me. So the reframe for this is it's okay to rest. And that my busyness does not equal my worth.
Say that part again. That might have to be the affirmation for this week.
Right. My busyness does not equal my worth. So I am a worthy, valuable person if I'm sitting on the couch or if I'm working. And then the last one is the natural genius, which is this idea that I'm only confident if I master a task with ease and speed, and often after one try. And this reminds me of my son, Everett. He is the sorest loser I have ever known, I have ever seen. When I say full on tantrum, if he doesn't perfect something right away, and he just thinks that he shouldn't have to work for it. He thinks that like I took him to karate. We had to pull him out of karate class because he was so upset with himself that he didn't know how to do karate after just seeing the instructor do it one time.
Okay.
And I had to be like, Everett, we got to practice. We got to practice, honey.
Right.
And so the reframe here is that success can be a process. That we don't sometimes we will get the thing the first time, but many times we will not. And that's okay because we're human.
Yeah, we are. Sometimes I think we forget that part as well. Life happens. And I think that's what I've been trying to tell myself too, that instead of being so hard on myself, it's life. Take a deep breath, literally take a deep breath and then take it from there, because I'm always focused on the next thing or on the goal. How can I fix this? How can I perfect this? And I didn't know that I haven't accepted that I'm a perfectionist, but I feel like, I am. It is what it is. I am who I'm accepting it, but I'm also trying to find ways to not let it be who I am. Let it consume me, because it's a hard life out here trying to be a perfectionist. It's just not easy.
Yeah, because it's a good thing. It's a good thing to create things, and that your contribution in these spaces is to such a high level. That's great. But sometimes it makes us sick, literally physically sick, the stress that we might put ourselves under because we are trying to be perfect in all aspects of our lives. And so then maybe questions that we can ask ourselves is can I afford to do all of these things and be a perfectionist? Or do I need to narrow down what I'm doing to just do one or two things instead of 10? Or I'm somebody that's always late to things. I like pack so much stuff into my schedule.
You know, I'm going to be late. I'm just a late girl. I like to embrace that.
I pack so much stuff into my schedule and I don't know. I guess I just don't think that time exists. I don't know what it is, but I'm just always late. And so days when I just at some point throughout the day, like I give up so that I can like release some of the stress. But what I should be doing is planning my days accordingly, you know, like not packing in 5 things that are across the city from each other and instead like 2 things.
Yeah. But then I feel like when you say that, for me, it's just so funny because I'm always doing things. And that second question that you asked, like, what can we narrow down or stop doing to? And I think for me, I juggle a lot. And sometimes, like today, I went to a brunch with the Black Jewelers of Columbia here. Because, you know, we're trying to form this group and network because, again, we need that community. And I remember going to brunch and 3 of the individuals, they know me because we were like the founding members of the group. And they were like, oh, let's go on the table telling us about yourself. And I'm like, one, I'm always like, I don't know, what am I going to say about myself? I say, hi, I'm Tanya, that's it. Because I mean, there's just so much, I don't know what to pick from the many things that I do. And I remember when they got to meet and I was like, oh, hi, I'm Tanya, nice to meet you. And they were like, girl, don't do that. Just tell us all what you do because you know you do the most or whatever. And I listed some things and then I forgot some, which is crazy. But, you know, just to see that they were, in a sense, embracing that, you know what, Tanya does do a lot. But at the same time, I remember telling them that I've had to think about it and I finally made a decision about a week ago to just remove some things that I'm doing because it's just too much. I cannot focus on, if I'm a high achiever and I want to make sure that I'm achieving my goals and all these different things, accomplishing and all these different things in my life, because we all have goals at the end of the day. I cannot sit here and tell myself you can accomplish every single one of these things. Because again, one thing about me, I'm going to do what I'm saying I'm going to do. Nothing is going to stop me. No one is going to stop me. I don't care who you are, what you've accomplished. You're not going to stop me from accomplishing my goals. But realistically speaking, I had to understand that all these things are not going to get done because you're spread too thin. You're not focused. Even though you think you're focused on this one task, you're not. So I just made a decision that I'm going to cut back on something. It wasn't easy. It's still uncomfortable because I'm like, girl, what is my life without doing these other 3 things? But it's what's needed because, again, I'm not showing up 100% with them, these other items or these other goals that I have. I'm not. Then the imposter syndrome is creeping in even more because I'm not the best at what I'm doing right now because I don't have the focus. You know what I mean? So I made a decision. I'm going to dial it back a little bit, and I'll probably talk about it sometime on the podcast sometime soon. But I made a decision to just dial it back and just write a list of 3 to 5 things that I can focus on and the things that I'm going to stay and commit to because I can't accomplish my goals. It's going to stress me out physically. Like I already suffer from migraines. It's going to affect my gut health. It's going to affect my mental health. It's going to affect my physical health, all these different things. So I had to do that. Like I said, when we asked him that question, I had to tell myself, you know what? I'm going to cut back on some things, which brings me, maybe that's a way of me managing my expectations, of course, but also managing the imposter syndrome because I noticed it. I don't know. So how can we manage that imposter syndrome when we notice it? Because I feel like, again, I recognize and acknowledge that because we got to acknowledge some of the things in our life. So we can't just say, oh, that's what it is. We got to accept it and acknowledge it. So now that I've accepted, you know what, Tanya, you can't keep doing this because you're going to keep experiencing burnout. It's just not going to work anymore. And even though it's sad, it's not like I'm not going to go back to this particular goal. But for the phase or stage in my life right now, I cannot.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you like connected those two because I think that's exactly right. Okay, the thing is, we just cannot be perfect at everything. Like that's the actual reality of the situation. And when we are taking on too much, I think that it heightens like the chance that I'm not going to be able to do something at the level of excellence that I want. And so I'm also recently told, so I was applying for a membership on a board, but this board wanted 10 hours a month of my time. And I said, I can't do 10 hours a month. Like I saw it in the job description, but I figured it was like loose. It was not.
Oh, wow.
It was not. So I told them like, I have concern. I don't think I'm going to be able to do 10 hours. I can probably do 5. Mm-hmm. The board decided not to have me on as a board member, which I appreciate because I would like, that is a place where my imposter syndrome would be really high. Mm-hmm. One, because I don't have a lot of experience being on a board, on like a board for a nonprofit. So I'm already in a space where I would need to learn some stuff and like catch up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
2, because I would be trying to do all of this knowing that, so that's going to take more time, the learning part, plus they want 10 hours, but I can only give them 5.
Yeah.
So it seemed like, you know, in that circumstance for me, it was a setup. Like I'm trying to set myself up without even knowing it for failure and for imposter syndrome. And so I do think that that's one of the things that we can do is take a step back to take like an objective look at what's actually going on. Because the fact of the matter is we may be super duper smart, but we may not have the experience that we feel like we want to have or need to have for this situation. And so maybe that's a space where we're going to need to spend more time learning so that we're able to feel more confident. Because it's not necessarily like, I mean, we may lack confidence and that's fine. But where the imposter syndrome comes up is where we are qualified, yet we don't think that we are. And so also distinguishing between like, well, is this a time where I'm just not as prepared? Or is this a time when I am prepared? I just don't think that I am for some reason. And then, you know, I do want to talk about race specifically.
Yes.
Because like I mentioned earlier, the environment that we are all in is one of whiteness.
Yep.
And like I'm somebody that talks a lot about white dominant culture and this idea that the culture of whiteness is the dominant culture in our society. And that culture may or may not be something that is in line with my own culture. And so I'm not talking about white people and I'm not talking about good or bad. I'm just talking about that right now I live in a culture that is different from my own culture. So what that means is that everything within my culture is shaped by whiteness. Everything from how our institutions look, what we're learning in school, what's important to learn, what's not important to learn, what's fake news and what's not fake news, what our media is talking about, the way that we see each other and that we determine like whether ambition is a good thing or a bad thing. And even down to our tone, the tone that we use, you know, Black women are tone policed all the time.
All the time.
And in this environment, we're not always able to be ourselves. And not being ourselves, I think, you know, contributes to feeling like we are imposters because we are fake. And not because we want to be necessarily, but because that's how we've identified us being able to navigate the situation. So I like to also say when I'm having conversations about imposter syndrome, that sometimes we're just experiencing racism. Like sometimes we're having imposter experiences that are because we are physically different in that environment than other people. And that might be race, of course, but that also might be gender. If I am a woman or a trans person in a space that is full of men or of cisgendered people, that might be if I'm a disabled person with a physical disability and I'm in a space where nobody else has a physical disability and like I'm in a wheelchair, so I can't even, like I'm not even looking people in the eye, like I'm having to look up at them. There are lots of environments that we can find ourselves in that are going to create a feeling of imposter syndrome because simply put, like we are different. And so as far as race is concerned, Black people and other people of color right now are the minority in the United States and we're the minority in professional spaces and we can feel it.
Yeah.
And so I don't want people, like one of the questions that I ask myself about my imposter syndrome is, am I really feeling like imposter syndrome or is this racism? Or is this imposter experiences? Is this other people putting me into a box or thinking less of me because of my Blackness or because of my womanness? Because imposter syndrome itself is an internal thing.
Yeah.
But if it's being put on me, then that's an external thing. And that's an imposter experience or imposter treatment and not imposter syndrome.
So I think you say what we say, like it's like that racial trauma that we've experienced would sometimes makes us feel that we are, because again, like I say, it may not be imposter syndrome, but again, I'm a Black woman taking up
space
in a predominantly white
You taking up white space.
So it's like, sometimes I battle. I'm like, am I experiencing imposter syndrome? Because I know sometimes I'm confident. I know I'm supposed to be here.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, but on the other hand, I'm thinking to myself, well, you know what, girl, you're black. For me, I got to deal with you're already black, taking up a white space. You have an accent that sometimes I try to mask. And I told myself, you know what, I don't want to do this code switching where I'm speaking English. You can understand what I'm saying. Yes, I am different. So that's my thought process now.
You do speak fast though.
I do. Like it's crazy. My dad would tell you, Tanya, slow down, you're on a waist track. I'm trying to work on that. I've been trying to work on this since I could talk. So at this point, I don't know. But yes, I've been mindful about the speed. But again, I feel like I'm dealing with the color of my skin. I'm from the Caribbean. I have an accent. So then you're looking at me strange. So I'm like, is it imposter syndrome or is it because I feel like you're going to judge me
because you are different. Like, that's the fact of the matter. We are different in these spaces. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing, but we don't have to internalize that as imposter syndrome because it's not.
Right.
And like, so you were mentioning being the only Black person in a class that you had.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not, you might feel some kind of way, but it's not because you don't belong, like, because you don't have the intellectual capacity to be in that class. Other people might think that because they are racist and don't think that Black women from the Caribbean with an accent have the educational capacity to understand the words that are coming at you right now. Like, other people may think that, but that's not your reality.
I get that. So as we get ready to wrap up, and I know because I truly enjoyed your Sister Circle episode. That was an episode that I got introduced to, then I had to go back and listen to episode 0. But anyway, that besides the point. But when we talk about community, because for me, being here in South Carolina, essentially with no family, I'm having to build or rebuild a community here because it's something that I thrive on, being around people, like-minded individuals working towards a common goal, even if it's not that, but just building that community aspect for some reason, because it's how I grew up. I grew up around, we were going to church. We had all these different church activities, these different groups that we were part of that we looked forward to going to church simply because we wanted to socialize with our friends. It's some of the friends that I have today came from that community, from church, So as Black women in the community, and how can we essentially build or rebuild the community within our circles or women when it comes to combating imposter syndrome, but not only imposter syndrome, but just in general? Because we need that support essentially. But I know many of us we feel. I have spoken to people who are in academia. They have PhDs. They're entering into the teaching spaces. But again, the number for Black women when it comes to who have PhDs. Like, we talk about the numbers for Black podcasters. That's one. The number of Black women who have PhDs who are teaching, it's very, very small. So then some are also feeling like, okay, do I belong here? Why am I here? I'm taking up this white space. It's not a good feeling. So how can we build a community to help combat not only imposter syndrome, but just having that community so we can lean on to take up these spaces in our workplaces?
Yeah. So what's been really helpful for me is having my sister circle. And my sister circle, like Tanya mentioned, I have 2 episodes on my podcast, the first 2 episodes on my podcast that feature the different women who are just extremely close to me, who I consider my sisters. And my sister circle was very intentional. I had moved across country from Seattle to the South, to South Georgia, and was starting in my professional career and was basically looking for anybody to be my friend. And it, was one person, I met through work, and then another person I met through my then boyfriend, now husband, and things kind of just came together. But we are all professionals who, have different backgrounds, but who are all working and navigating in professional spaces. We're mostly the same age, although we have one person who's pushing 60. And she's like the mom of the group. But she will outlast any of us at a club. Like, when I say she will stay up, so our jobs are in different fields. There are a couple of us who are lawyers. There are a couple who are therapists or mental health professionals, and folks who do other stuff as well. And so these people are people who I message, who I call or text whenever I have a problem. And when I say whenever, I mean any problem. They are the people that I don't even text my husband first.
Really?
Right. Well, because sometimes he doesn't like texting. He doesn't like talking on the phone. He wants to see me in person. So I save my stuff until I see him. But if I need an answer right this second, if I need support right this second because I'm going through it at work or somebody just said a racist thing to me or whatever the case may be, I text this group of people and immediately, or within the hour, get several responses with different perspectives and backgrounds. And that is just so helpful for me because one, it lets me know that I'm not alone, that other people have experienced it, and this is what they did. So if I'm not in a place where I feel like I can affirm myself, because that is a tool that I use is affirmations. Yeah. But if I can't even think of an affirmation today, then I rely on my sister circle to give me those affirmations or to give me those accolades or the external validation that sometimes I need. But I also rely on them to give me like actual tools. Like if I'm experiencing something like right now, I am currently negotiating my exit from my workplace. Mm-hmm. And I reached out to them because I want to know how y'all had experience with this and what did you do? So I think it's so important for us to have people that we trust and can lean on, whether that is a spouse or whether that is a family member or whether that's a random group of friends. It's been so helpful for me because like there's no manual for adulting at all. And there's definitely not a manual for adulting while Black. And so I needed people to be able to bounce stuff off of in order to figure out this thing of like adulting and life. So that's been really important to me. And I really encourage folks, like my number one tool for navigating just life's discomfort, my sister circle, and then therapy.
Oh yeah. I'm a big advocate for therapy. Mm-hmm. Never thought I'd be that person, but let me tell you, I will go to the mountaintop and talk about therapy and telling you why you need to be in therapy. Because too many times, especially as Black people, we think, oh, we don't need to go to therapy. We don't need to do X, Y, Z. Oh, I'm telling somebody my business. No, it's all when we talk about building that community as well or having that toolbox, your therapist is also one of those people that's in your toolbox that you can pull out at any given time to get to the next level. So I think we have to change that narrative surrounding building a sister circle or a circle of individuals who share, who I would say have some similar shared experiences. Mm-hmm. It is. So you want to have someone or individuals who have similar experiences as you, so can relate. Because like you say, you have a group of friends who are from different walks of life, but they've experienced, the likelihood of us experiencing something similar is very, very high.
Right.
So I think sometimes when we think about, oh, I don't need this person in my circle, or as the young folks say, no new friends and all these different things. And I'm like, I can't necessarily subscribe to that because I need you to gas me out when I need to be gassed up.
Yeah. Yes. So my husband is like a no new friends person. Like he feels like he's met all the people that he needs to meet in life. And I just don't feel that way. And I'll say you had posted something on Instagram recently around like what's required in a friendship or something like that. And I'll say a couple of things about that. One, I think that the people that we associate with should be people that we're proud to associate with, who we get something from, who like, I see you and I want what you got, because I don't want to be reaching out for advice for somebody who I don't admire, who I don't know, maybe because they'll give me their feedback, but their feedback that may get me fired,
that part.
So that's the one. But then also that it should be a mutual commitment, I think. And so these types of circles, like this is not mentorship.
Yeah.
Although I love mentorship too. And I do think that as mentees, we should be giving back to our mentors. But anyways, this needs to be two-sided where like I'm getting something from the relationship and you're getting something from the relationship. And if it's one-sided either way, then for me, it's not going to work. And so those are the two things around like finding and building your sister circle is like have people who you're like, who inspire you, who you're proud to know, who like you want to be like, and then be mutual in that relationship.
I agree. And on that note, Whitney, thank you for joining me here in the tea tasting room. It was such a pleasure. I still can't believe I was overly nervous and sweating bullets.
I cannot believe that.
Believe it either for us to record this episode. And it has been a pleasure. I've learned a lot. And I'm like, you know what? These people need to hear this episode ASAP. Tell them where they can find you and, how they can see.
Yes. Yes. So the podcast is Impostrix Podcast. It's spelled Impostrix. And basically, I'm on all the socials as Impostrix Podcast. You can also just find everything, find out more about the show, find out more about me, find out my socials by visiting the website, which is impostrixpodcast.com.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us here in the tea tasting room, Whitney.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Tea with Tanya. If you like this episode, be sure to share it with a friend. Don't forget to follow on Instagram at Tea with Tanya Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the weekly Tea Talk newsletter. And of course, rate on Apple or Spotify and subscribe wherever you listen. See you next time. I love you for listening.
And that's a wrap on today's show. I would love to hear from you. You can find all of my contact information and you can find ways to support the show directly on my website, www.impostrixpodcast.com. Until next time, be validated.